about servant leadership, we're talking about making ourselves uncomfortable generally as leaders.
Most definitely. And, I think what is probably the most critical in that concept of servant leadership is that there are those who believe that they are fortified and that they are protected from the enemy.
Okay.
In business, in life, in relationships, but they have a false sense of security because they're not accessing it biblically. And so, people who know me at Christ Missionary know I drill down, and I'm not a scholar. I'm not a biblical scholar. I don't know all the scriptures and where everything is. It's just in my heart. You know what I mean?
There you go.
But I do know that if you're going to be a true leader, you have to understand how to fortify yourself in your position or the role or the gift that God has stirred up on the inside of you, so that when the enemy attacks, and the enemy will, in whatever way the enemy attacks, you can still be at ease and have peace in life, because you know that the fence that you have built around whatever, your business, your life, your relationships, your finances, your whatever that is, the fence that you have built around it can withstand whatever comes at you. And so what we're trying to do is to help build leaders and to empower and to engage and to educate leaders who don't find their peace in the traditional. And that's what makes you uncomfortable, because it's not traditional. It's not what everybody else is doing. It's not what everybody else, it's not popular. And oftentimes it's not rational.
Sounds countercultural to me.
Oh, most definitely. This is a slingshot, ministry here. This is not the armor that, Saul. So that's really what this is about for me. This is what it's about. I believe the calling, because even my calling in this season is uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Okay?
Big time.
I'm not protected like most people would think.
Sure, yeah. Well, frankly, one of the things that really stood out to me, and there are so many really cool opportunities that you have going on at your place, and things that you've dug down deep, as you've suggested. About one of the things that stood out to me in one of the videos you sent was the one on benefits, about Romans chapter 8.
Yeah.
You want to kind of springboard off that for a minute and explain that to folks?
Yeah, that scripture, we titled it "Trouble with Benefits," and what we wanted to do was juxtapose the difference between trouble and travail. Yeah, because there are a lot of people who find themselves in tight situations, and they consider it trouble. And I tried my best to help folk understand that, when you see a mother going through childbirth, if you did not really know what was going on and you was standing outside the room and you was listening to all the screaming and hollering, you'd say, somebody's in trouble, call the police, right? Somebody's getting beat, call the police. Somebody's, because it sounds like trouble. But the difference between that mother's scream and another mother who's being beat, right, by her husband or boyfriend or whatever, the difference between those screams is what comes after. Right? The pregnant mother is screaming because she's in labor about to produce a life. Yes. Right? The other woman is screaming, but she's not producing life. She's producing bondage. Right? She's producing paralyzation. Right? She's producing anger and fear and those kinds of things. So the difference between the two is just simply that oftentimes we have to, distinguish between what God puts us, the seasons that we're in that are designed to produce fruit out of our lives. Most often, in order for God to produce that fruit, we have to go through labor pains, right? we have to go through uncomfortable, often life-altering, physically altering situations such that we will never be the same after God is done with us. And so even at that, the screams, it's important for us in the body of Christ and those who are believers, I'm talking to believers, for us to be in tune to the screams so that when men cry, it's not like a dog whistle and nobody hears them.
Yeah.
Right?
This reminds me, since you're talking about Romans chapter 8, it reminds me of that statement in Romans 8:27 where it says that we bring our moans and our wails and the things we can't express, groanings of our spirit, to the Spirit, who then takes them to the throne for us.
Correct.
And when I think about that, I think, my word, here you have this tremendous benefit,
most definitely,
of the Spirit to take care of those kinds of things for us.
Yeah, and that doesn't say that you won't.
No,
it just says when you do.
When you do,
here's the benefit when you do, and because nobody said it was going to be easy. Nobody said that we wouldn't have trouble. Nobody said we wouldn't moan. Nobody said we wouldn't groan. Nobody said we wouldn't be frustrated. Nobody said we wouldn't lack. Nobody said it wouldn't be hard. Nobody said we wouldn't fall. Nobody said we wouldn't fail. Those things are going to happen. The question is when we go through those things, is it trouble or is it travail? And that really is up to us, right? Because I say it all the time, the same thing happens every day, just to different people.
One of the folks that lived through Auschwitz wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And one of the things he said in that book, very similar to what we're talking about here, is that a person can have everything taken from them but this one thing, and that is the attitude with which you respond to the situation around you.
Correct. And that's the only thing you can control. I can't control Donald Trump, clearly. I can't control what's happening around. I can't control you. I can't control the weather. I can't. There's a lot in life that I can't. For as much as we try, there are things in life we cannot control. But the one thing we can control is how we respond to what life throws at us. And so that really is what that video it was all about. Just trying to gain a little perspective.
No, absolutely. And which, kind of brings us back around to the baseline of what we're talking about here today, which is the concept of being uncomfortable in leadership. And maybe we could talk about that for a minute, about the importance of, from your perspective as a leader at your church, in your community, in these conferences that you're putting on, those kinds of things. How do you find yourself in the midst of uncomfortable leadership and your response to it? Are there things that stand out to you that way?
In all things, through prayer and supplication, right, and thanksgiving, make your request, right, known unto the Lord. Part of what we're doing and dealing with is just part of the answered prayer. I didn't ask for this. Let me be clear. Okay, I did not ask for this. I was not specific with the Lord. I did not say, Lord, this is how I want things to go. All I said was, God, allow me to make a dent in the universe. Allow me to make impact. That's a dangerous prayer. Yeah, it's like, here I am, Lord, use me. Right? And I did not know what that meant. I just knew that I was called back to Indianapolis for something, an assignment. Did not know what it was. And so through prayer and supplication, and watch this, and in thanksgiving, I had to find things to be thankful for. There wasn't things around me because I was losing everything when I accepted this assignment to come back to Indianapolis. Okay. We were fine. We were comfortable in Nashville. I had my house. I had my job. I was political. I had my businesses. I had my friends. I had, the faith piece. I had been ordained. I was in church. I was doing. We were fine. Yeah. Right? We were comfortable. And so in order to kind of find myself where I am now, all it was me saying, let me pray, right? Let me humbly submit to the Lord in whatever I'm doing. I said, okay, Lord, you say go back to Indianapolis. All right. Then you kind of opened the way to make it happen. He called, Ball State called, said, we got a job for you. Come on back. Okay. So I went up there to teach. They told me it was a year's contract. I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't know. I just knew that, I just knew that I knew what I prayed, and that's all.
Yeah.
And when things began to sort of, the layers of the onion started peeling back, the response that God placed in me was a servant response. It was a sacrificial response to what was being laid in front of me.
Okay.
And then, you hear these all the time. And one night, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the Lord said, go downstairs. There's something on your shelf that you wrote several years ago. Pull it off. It was called Unite for Change. It had been sitting on my shelf for, 3-4 years.
Wow.
I opened it up. It looked like I had written it the day before. It was still relevant. And God said, bring it to life. And he said, don't ask. Now watch, this was what really needs to be clear. The Lord told me, do not ask anyone else to sacrifice. The Lord said, you be the sacrifice.
Wow. And
that's how we ended up doing and sort of leading in the direction that we were leading.
Okay, so I got to tell you,
wow.
This straight up, this is not the kind of thing that we teach in leadership courses. Let me just say that right out loud.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I teach leadership courses. This is my bailiwick. I'm a professor of leadership, education, and discipleship. I teach this stuff, and we do not teach this stuff, what you're talking about right here, right now. So I'm going to tell you, man, that this is going to be one of those front and center things I'm going to tell people about in the future. We're going to do this podcast, and I'm going to tell my students, look, you need to listen to this pastor, and you need to tell them, you need to listen to him because he's going to tell you about a whole different kind of situation you're going to confront at some point in your life.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Do you think that people, leaders generally speaking, don't really prepare for this stuff?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. We prepare, and okay, let's be clear.
Yeah.
The preparation for what God has called us to do in this season didn't start when I got to Indianapolis. This is what we really have to understand. The preparation for this started, I think I was maybe 7. Everybody doesn't have an experience. I'm telling y'all a whole lot. Man.
No, that's okay, man. Go.
Everybody doesn't have a Damascus Road experience, and I get that. But I had sort of one of those epiphanies, if you will. We were living on the east side of town. I was in the living room. And I opened up the window, and maybe I was dreaming. I don't know. It's been so long ago, but I never forget the way it made me feel. I opened up the window, and I saw a cloud or some clouds, and the clouds kind of opened up, and I saw a lot of people, and I was saying something to the people. I don't know what I was saying, but I know how it was making the people feel. I could feel that it was making the people feel assured and satisfied and, and whatnot. And that was the end of it. And so I had kind of felt like I was on this journey to find that experience, right? And God put me in these positions and these places and these situations and circumstances of leadership, if you will, whether that be everything from the breakdance club at Lawrence North High School. We started that when I was in high school. We did back then we had Rwandan famine relief.
Oh my!
And we did a dance that we coordinated with the school called Breaking for Bread, where we basically had these parties. We raised money and we sent the money to Rwanda for the famine relief. I was 16 at the time. I think I started selling peanut butter cookies out the back of my mom's house, right? My mother and father bought me a bike. Somebody stole it. When they gave it back to me, it was all trashed. My parents said, well, we just bought your bike. We're not going to buy you another one. So I started a business fixing up broken down bikes.
That's
and
great.
people would bring me their bikes, and I would take them apart and put them back together, and then charge them for it. So God has been doing this from that vision forward, preparing me so that if you know me, which very few people in Indianapolis do, which is weird, but if you really know me, then you would look at everything that we've done and say, that's Gert. That's Gert.
Okay.
There's nothing from the tent to the conferences to the teaching at church. I'm not necessarily a preaching teacher. I'm more of a teaching preacher.
Okay.
I'm not a preaching teacher. I'm
Gotcha.
Gotcha. So, nobody would say anything other than some of the things that we're doing now, we did these 15 years ago in Nashville. The Fatherhood Initiative, that's a new mentality from 1999.
Okay.
So
none of these things are really new in that sense of things. Yeah.
Not at all. We've been doing, this is what we've been called to do, and we've been doing this stuff for years. It's just that, like I said, that was classroom stuff, and then this was the test.
Well, what stands out to me in all of this, as I hear you saying these things, is this famous line from Jeremiah 1:5, that before you were in the womb, while you were in the womb, I prepared you for this particular position.
Right.
And it certainly sounds like you've had a similar kind of experience.
And part of my message is that, oftentimes I'll say God is not going to call you into doing something you're not already doing, right? And that doesn't mean that God can't call you from being an accountant to being a social worker. I'm not saying that he can't do that, but I'm just suggesting that often God is preparing you along the way.
Right.
By the time, you get to where you're supposed to go, if you really look at what's in your hand, right? What's in your hand? He says, Moses, what's in your hand? He says, oh, it's rod. Well, David, what's in your hand? Oh, slingshot. Oh, So that's kind of how I see it, that God has been preparing me along the way so that when I got here, it was just a matter of time before the things that he wanted me to do to manifest, such that when I do them, for people, who will say, well, Pastor G, slow down. Pastor G, don't take on too much. Pastor G, it looks easy because I always say I was built for this. So.
Yeah, nonetheless, it's still there. My mom, just for the sake of interest here, my mom listens to this show. Good morning, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Thank you. She lives in Denver, Colorado, and one of the things she'll tell me all the time is this idea that when I was 11 years old, I held my first microphone. And look at us now.
Yeah.
Here we are, doing the microphone.
Still doing it.
That's right.
And doing it very well.
Yeah, good. Well, God prepares us for things. I think that's really an important idea here. So let's kind of make that the next question, as it were. When you think about preparation, are there other things in your life that come to mind? You mentioned this experience at 7 and going down the staircase and grabbing something, Unite for Change, that you had written some time back. Are there other preparation markers that you can think of along the way that might encourage other people in this regard?
Failure.
Uncomfortable, man.
I'm just saying.
You're making us all uncomfortable.
Failure. The first business plan that I wrote was for something called GNA Records. It was a demo tape production company. Never got off the ground. The next business plan I did was for mass media consulting. I wrote that in college. And I submitted it. I was trying to get into the business school because once I got into Ball State, I was in communications, but I felt that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but there was no entrepreneurship program. So I tried to get into the school and I was denied. So I said, well, that's fine. I'll figure out how to do it myself. And so I got, there was a no los or low notes or something like that. They had this back then little floppy disk. I'm showing my age. They had this little floppy disk that had sort of the template of a business plan on it. So I used that. Back then we were using Mac SE30s. It's the first time I'd ever seen a computer. I learned how to type on a typewriter. Okay. So when I got to college, I had never seen a computer. And so somebody introduced me to a computer lab, which is a whole nother story. I'll come back to talk about.
We'll come back and do that, yeah.
About that. But so I used that template to actually, flush out this business plan. Turned it in for a competition, the David Letterman Scholarship there at Ball State. I didn't win the scholarship, but at least I was honorable mention or whatever. I sat in class. I drew the logo while I was sitting in class, that kind of thing. When I got out of school, I could not get a job to save my life. 59 wouldn't hire me, 8 wouldn't hire me, 6. Mind you, I had been doing production. I had video work that was on, BET.
Wow.
Before I got out of college.
Wow.
So I had a fairly successful production career before I was 21. I was the youngest and only African-American cameraman at the 1987 Pan American Games.
My word.
Receiving awards from Australia for an archery piece that we did. I had done documentaries on Babyface and Stevie Wonder. We flew down to Atlanta to interview L.A. Reid with LaFace Records. I mean, and I'd already done some really, really, really great stuff. And when I graduated, I couldn't find a job to save my life. And so I started the business that I had done the business plan for. Well, fast forward, and there's more stuff to it. The music industry, there's way more stuff. Y'all can call me later on that. We can talk about that. But my point is that I started the business, never really got it to get off the ground until I got to Nashville in about 1999. Ran that business for about 5 years, had to close it down, so consider that another failure. Then a few more little try to upstarts, those would fail. I preached about this last Sunday, talking about Jacob wrestling with the angel. And I said, some folk just don't know when to quit. Right? And what I said was, you don't quit when you're wounded. You quit when you win. And that's kind of where I've always been in failure.
Okay.
That even though failure might wound me, I say I'm not going to let go.
So perseverance.
I'm not going to let go. I'm not going to quit. When I got to Indianapolis and the contract at the university ended, they put a contract on the table. It was like, I'm not doing that. I can't survive off of that and drive back and forth. That's not going to work. That was in 2010, 2011. Came back to Indianapolis. I haven't worked a full-time job since then. Okay. And the rejection emails.
Yeah.
The rejection letters.
Yeah, that's right.
Had me in a state of depression. That was extremely deep. Because you're looking at a guy that in 2002 generated $555,000 a year.
My word.
I had lost my house. We were renting. We had to move out of that house because I couldn't afford it. Our cars were being repossessed. And I'm that kind of transparent, so y'all don't be uncomfortable.
That's fine. No, we're fine. So I ended up moving my whole family back into my mother's house. Okay. I'm 42 years old. I'm going, this is not how it's supposed to go. Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so the biggest lesson was through that failure, or what the world would consider to be failure, right, was that I had to forget who I started to think I was, and remember who God said that I was.
There it is, yeah.
And again, we can talk about the point where that happened later on another show, because that gets into why I spend so much time dealing with mental health. Yeah. Because I felt with all that I was able to do, where my mind went, I can only imagine some of these other folk out here who didn't have a business, didn't have a bachelor's, don't have an associate's, don't have a high school diploma, got a felony or a criminal background.
That's right.
Don't have the support, don't have the money. I'm thinking, I got all that, and I'm here, right? So what about those folk?
That's right.
And so that's my motivation in that regard. Nevertheless, so the one thing I learned was to remember who God said you are, and not who you think you are. And that gave me motivation to think like this. I would get rejection letters and emails. They were coming so fast and furious and at the most unopportune times that I would say, you know, I really don't have a reason to get up today.
Yep.
I don't have a job. I've got resumes in. I'm not getting phone calls back. It's not like, you know, I'm going into job sites meeting my students that I taught.
Okay.
So you can
Yeah.
imagine that.
Yeah.
But the way I walked away from that was, I'm going to get up. I'm going to get dressed. And I'm going to act like I got someplace to go. Because today might be the day.
Might be the day.
And I had to do that 365 days a year. And I still do it. I get up as if today is the day I'm going to get the phone call where somebody says, man, we heard about you. We'd like to talk to you. Today might be the day where somebody says, man, your resume has been sitting on my desk and I just hadn't thought to call you until today. Today might be the day where somebody says, hey, you know, I met somebody and they might, send me an email. Every email I look at with a level of expectation and anticipation. That's how I have to get up. And so hopefully somebody who's listening who may be facing failure on that level might be able to understand that the way you feel is normal. It's natural to feel that way. However, we have to, number one, come to ourselves, or someone around us has to help usher us to ourselves, right? And encourage ourselves to remember that we are not who the world says that we are.
That's right.
We should not be evaluated according to the matrix of the world or the measurement of the world. We must measure ourselves to who God said that we are. And when we do that, then we can do as I did. I went back and finished my master's while I was unemployed. I went back and got some training. I taught myself to be, a social media manager. I taught myself WordPress and how to do websites. I taught myself HTML5 and CSS3.
You do what you need to do.
I did what I needed to do.
It strikes me as we're having this conversation, especially about leadership and specifically about the failure issues. This is huge, and you're right. We need to have you back, and we'll talk about these things, and we'll have some heart-to-heart about what it means to go through the valley.
Yeah.
But we will. We really need to point out a couple of things that are important, I think. I always ask all of our guests when they come on the show, send me a couple of pictures I can use in social media, which you did, and they were great pictures. But what struck me about your pictures, they were so unusual from everybody else's pictures. And one stands out, and I want to say something about that picture and then say something generally about social media and have you respond to it. So one of the pictures is you standing in front of a building that is dilapidated. It is going to fall down. And you're standing in front of this thing. Now, most people on social media do not put themselves out that way. Most people put themselves out, looking really good. Not to say you're not looking good, but they put themselves in front of a background that makes that whole thing look really sharp. That's generally how LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever else we want to talk about deals with life. When you think about this, was there some kind of prompt as far as you were concerned to do that particular shot? And was it a statement? Were you making a statement there about uncomfortable leadership?
Yeah. An uncomfortable leader looks for a storm to bring peace in the midst of it. That's what that picture was.
Okay.
The photographer Eric Dykes is a mentee of mine. And when we knew it was a spur of the moment kind of thing, we knew we were kind of going to do it, but we didn't know what it was going to look like, and it scared us.
Okay.
When we looked at the photo, it scared us. I'm serious.
Yeah, I get it.
and there are a couple others, but that he took. It was the most eerie photo. It really was.
Sure.
But it was reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
That particular house is the house that set the record for the number of burned out houses in 2016.
Oh, my word.
Which just so happened to be right across the street from my church.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
It is a whole story to the house, but the point was a true leader looks for a storm to bring peace. I'm not talking about a CEO. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I'm not talking about a CFO, a COO, or some of everything they got now, chief smile expert, whatever. I'm talking about a true leader, because you have those folk in Zimbabwe. Yeah. You have those folk in the hood. You have true leaders, right, in homes, right? You have true leaders on the job that don't have a title. There are some janitors that are true leaders, right? There are cafeteria workers that are true. I'm talking about a true leader doesn't shine until there's a storm.
Hang on to that thought, because we need to take a break. I'm looking at the clock. Just glanced at the clock. Didn't realize we've been talking for half an hour, man.
Are you serious?
I know. This is just kind of sliding on by. So we're going to take a short musical break here, and we'll come back. We'll talk about the storms of leadership. We are back. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We are so pleased that Pastor G is in the house today. Thank you so much for being here. We actually cut off our little bit of discussion as we were going to break about the issue of the storms. Let's come back to that again and why leadership needs storms.
Yeah. You know, and leadership needs storms the way vegetation needs death.
Oh, that's a meme right there, there, man.
I mean, I don't know. Tweet that.
There you go.
Without seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a book or an article or something. I can't remember what it was. I was reading something, and they were talking about everything in life cannot be rational. It takes the ambiguity of the irrational to make life interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The example that was given was that if everybody who found a wallet full of money kept it because it was rational, we would not have an understanding, of people who care enough to try to find the owner of the wallet to return it. That's irrational, right? And so, for as much as we enjoy success doesn't mean the same thing until you have experienced, failure.
Yeah.
And we don't like that, but it just is the case.
Right.
Sometimes I use the example that my mother is from Gallatin, Tennessee, a little small town just northeast of Nashville. And growing up, we always had a garden. And my mother would have us do some of the to us, just the craziest things. We would be spraying trees, and I hope my mother's watching now, because she's, she tries to keep up with everything we do. But we spray trees, we'd be wiping doors, it'd be just crazy stuff. But one of the things she used to have us do that we really thought was the craziest thing is that at the end of the year, we would go through this process. We would rake the leaves. We would take all the leaves, and instead of doing what everybody else did, put them in a barrel and burn them, or put them in a bag and put them out for somebody. She would say, go put them on the garden.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So we just dump them on the garden, nobody, and then she'd say, light it on fire. And we say, okay. We light them on fire, and we would burn the leaves over the garden. Then she would say, let it sit. The winter would come, the snow would come, do its thing or whatever, and then in springtime, she would give us a shovel and say, go turn it over. And we'd say, okay. And we'd go out there and we'd turn it over, not really realizing that the fire and the death of the leaves and the time of the season and the coldness and the damp and all of that was preparing the soil so that the next year's crop would have good ground.
There it is. Yeah.
There's a process to good ground.
That's right.
There's a process to servant leadership, not leadership.
Not just leadership.
Servant leadership.
Yeah.
There's a process. That's why I was just saying, if you want your mind stayed on Jesus and all that, and you want peace in the midst of your storm, whatever, there are some things that you just have to do. These are not, you don't get a PhD by accident.
Yeah.
You didn't trip your way into a master's, right? Nobody wins a 100-yard dash by happenstance. There's a process. And I believe that leadership, true servant leadership, requires a process. And part of the recipe is going
death.
through.
Yeah. So, this reminds me so obviously of Jesus' famous lines in John chapter 12, where Jesus says, he talks about himself, essentially, that a seed has to die in order to produce fruit.
Yeah.
And so your comment about vegetation needing death is absolutely true, but we don't really think about that much. So let's take that for a moment and talk about generally how we train leaders poorly, and then let's talk about how we should start training leaders differently in a better, more Christian sense of things. Let's talk about the training of the leader.
Wow. And I don't do leadership training other than urban servant leadership stuff. Yeah. I kind of, my thing is kind of watch me walk. So I'm going to go from that perspective.
Yeah.
My whole deal with leadership training is, number one, you cannot be what you cannot see.
There you go.
So in that regard, here's what I always say. If you want to be something, whether that's in a leadership position or in a, a structured position where you have a leader, it is important to become, there's so many things I could say. But number one, it's important to be a student of that thing.
There you go.
Okay. One of the things that I struggle with probably more than anything, and I'm hard on myself about this, is that if a student came to me, or oftentimes I see people on the street with a computer, they're in Adobe, or with a DSLR camera or a video camera, or, and I see a clue that, okay, this person must be trying to do something in the creative field, it's a magnet for me. And so I want to go talk to them. And so when I'm talking to these people and I say, oh, so what do you do? And they say, well, I'm a graphic designer. And I say, oh, okay. And I ask them questions. I say, so what do you use? And they say, oh, well, I use Photoshop. And I go, oh, so you do creative art. I said, do you do publications? Yeah. And I said, okay, so what do you use? And they say, Photoshop. And I go, okay. And then I might ask, so how you feel about InDesign? And they go, what's that? And the first thing I think is, you're not a graphic designer. No. It's because if you're going to be that, then you have to be a student of that.
Right, there
and
you
as
go.
a student of that, if I ask you what is InDesign, I should be able to ask you what is InDesign, what is Illustrator, what is Fireworks, what is Photoshop, what is Premiere. I should be able to ask you what is, go back to what is Quark Express. I should be able to ask you what is PageMaker. Because if you're going to be that, be a student of it. Who says they want to be a poet and don't know who Shakespeare is? You don't want to be a poet. Is that making sense? Who says they want to be a musician? When I say Mozart, it's like, who? Stravinsky, right? What? You have to become a student of what you want to be.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is, as a student, then you begin to understand that you must surround yourself by people who are doing that thing, whether it be leadership or in the ranks.
Yep.
Surround yourself by people who are doing it, and the law says, ultimately, one day you will too. So that means that when you're looking at these people that are surrounded by you who are doing what you ultimately want to do, you can not only see their success, but you can also see their story and what it took for them to get there, which is often riddled with ups and downs. Because you can't, as the Bible helps us to understand, you can't accept Christ on the throne until you understand what Christ did on the cross. Okay? Because it's what he did on the cross that paved the way for what he's doing on the throne. Hello? Right? And that's where I believe we struggle the most, because we idolize what we see, right, up there. But we don't want to get into this down here. And that's knowing the story. That's the intimacy. I want to know him and the power of his resurrection.
Yeah. So this brings me back again to this thing that we mentioned early on, and that is our responsibility to respond.
Yeah.
We have this tendency to think, let's set it up this way. We have an entitlement tendency. And I don't mean that just in terms of how we think somebody owes us something, or government. You know, I don't want to talk about any of those kinds of things. But generally, as a human being, we think that, hey, if I'm doing everything this way, then everything should be just fine. But then reality slaps us upside the head, and we realize, hey, this isn't going this way. And this is what really frustrates me about Christians who don't understand what suffering is, and the concept of lament, and the ideas that we have to go through in terms of the blues, you know, just in terms of music, whatever that might be. Those kinds of things are huge, and obviously we're missing out on something there.
You know, and I mean, you say, I like what you said, when everything isn't all right. And I say everything is all right. Even when things aren't right, they are right. You know why? Because you're breathing. Because what I see is that when I need something, I've learned that God provides it. It's there. We just got to put in the work to make it happen.
So there's divine sovereignty, that is, God's in control of all things, but there's also human responsibility. Both of those things go together.
They do.
When I teach my students about this, I say, if you're flying in a plane and one wing is human responsibility, the other is divine sovereignty, which wing do you want to fall off? And the obvious answer is neither one.
Exactly.
Because you got to have both of them.
You got to have both of them.
Yeah.
You got to have both of them. Life, God gives us an ability, and it's our response to our ability that gets us to where God desires us to be. And so that's just kind of how I see it. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't born here.
Yeah.
I wasn't born in this state of mind. I've had to, like I said, I've had to go through, I've had to have my storms and my failures. I've had to go through ups and downs to get here, but I wouldn't take nothing for my journey.
The difficulty, of course, for those of us who are in the throes of it. So let's say, for instance, somebody's listening to us right now, and they're going through it. I mean, they're in the deep part of whatever darkness they're in. And what should we be saying to them? I mean, we've been talking about the realities of life here and being honest with folks. But if we had some final words to give folks who are going through it right now, what would you say right now?
I wouldn't say anything. I would just listen.
Yeah.
You know, that's, to me, one of the biggest problems we have with people who are going through is that they don't think anybody hears them or sees them. That is the African American experience, you know, in this country, is that we walk through life invisible. If there's one thing I learned from the tent campaign, was that if you tell people to talk or ask people about themselves, they will. They'll tell you everything you want to know.
Yeah.
All I really did for 30 days was make myself available to listen. I want people to feel like they are the most important thing or being on the earth when they come to me. My mother told me years ago, when I was, I don't know, a teenager, she said, you know, you have this uncanny ability to make people feel like they're the only person in the room. You know, locking eyes, telling everybody, back off. It's me and this person. When people are going through, most often they just want to be heard. They just want to know somebody sees me.
Yeah.
And that's where I am. You know, and one of the questions that you had for me, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but it brought back to my mind the fact that if I have a challenge, it manifests like this, that often I see more in people than they see in themselves. And it's not because of me projecting something on them, it's what they're projecting on me. When I listen to you, I'm like, look at all of this, you know. So often I see more in people than they see in themselves. And what hurts me, my burden, is when I realize that I'm sincere in my offering, and someone has been so wounded that they cannot accept my sincere hand. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You know, if you're listening to this live, or if you're going to listen to the podcast later on, let's just be real clear here. One of the biggest issues I think we face as leaders that we are not practicing well is shut up and listen. And that is a crucial component to everything we talk about every single week here, honestly. We're really interested in hearing what other people have to say. We're really happy that you were able to spend some time here with us, Pastor Gert, and thanks so much for taking the time today to do that.
Is that easy? Am I done? Or are we going to?
Well, I tell you what, man, we just burned through a whole hour. I mean, seriously, we are. I mean, if you want to stay, we can take a break. You come back. I know you got things to do, people to see. So if you want to come back in a few minutes, we'll do that. But we're going to take a break right now, a quick musical break. We're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site.
RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. And yes, Harold H.B. Bell, we have flipped the script on you guys today on Warp and Woof Radio with Dr. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell. We are here having a great time. Want to thank again Pastor G for coming in and sharing his great work and what he does in our Indianapolis community. And uncomfortable leadership, man. We were off air talking about
That's right, absolutely.
You know, with a candor that sometimes, you know, and leadership is uncomfortable. And the one thing that I love about it, Mark, is when we start talking about uncomfortable leadership, it usually gets to truth.
Isn't that the truth?
The cutting edge truth of what are you willing to accept
Right.
from someone else?
Yeah.
Not in a hurtful manner, but in a pure and truthful manner.
Yeah.
Most people don't like to have to deal with truth.
Right.
And so that, to me, just before we start our first segment in the second hour, is kind of where we come from, and when we're talking about uncomfortable leadership.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
what
right.
are you willing to do what's best for the people versus
That's right.
Sacrificing
That's right.
for self. And let's define the phrase uncomfortable leadership. Dang, I almost did it, didn't I?
Yeah, well, I think you did already. Yeah, absolutely. If we could say anything, I would say it's get out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's using the same term, but get out of your wheelhouse, get out of the easy chair. You know, pick a metaphor here. But I'll tell you why it's important. I'll give you 3 examples of this, all of them from my own personal life and right here, honestly. One of them, getting out of my own comfort zone, is going to the Avondale Y events. You know, when I thought about uncomfortable leadership, I'm going to a place where I'm the only white face in this community, where I can participate, and most of the time I listen. But this last time, you know, you invited me to participate in the mental health discussion. It was really great, and I loved it. Another place where I'm very uncomfortable, frankly, is at the place that I minister, which is IUPUI, and I find out things that are being said on campus and so on by professors and whatnot about one thing or another, and sometimes about me or about my gender or about my ethnicity, and these things make me uncomfortable, but I still bear responsibility to be uncomfortable in the sense that I need to be there. Another example of this is meeting new folks for this show. Now, a lot of folks might think, well, you know, this seems like an easy thing for you, Mark. You know, you seem to be such an extrovert and like to be with folks. Well, yeah, I don't not like to be with folks. That's not the issue. It's meeting new folks where you're pretty much just exposing yourself to say, hey, you know, I've got this thing. I wonder if you might be interested, and they might turn you down or they might just walk away. You know, those are things that are very uncomfortable. So there it is.
Absolutely. And tell me about, I can't, you know, I'm waiting on my script to come back up, actually.
Oh,
but
that's okay.
In the middle of that, when you say the uncomfortable feeling, you know, it's a lot of times as an African-American male doing some of the things that I do, I'm the only African-American.
Yes, you are.
I'm just be honest.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I never let that bother me because I think I've had to live with it most of my life and understanding it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, because once you kind of accept this is what it is, does that mean you're complacent about trying to make the changes that you see necessary, or does it mean I'm so comfortable with self that I don't really care about the ostracization?
Yeah, the drama that you have to deal.
Because it's built in the room, unseen drama.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for you and I mean, this is no big deal. We hit it off early and often, and since then, you know, become famous brothers here. That's not an issue. I think it's the issue of trying to help folks to see, you know, there are places and people and events and things they don't like to be involved with, and I think that's the uncomfortable part. Yeah. And so that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And so I guess getting to what we talk about each and every week on Warp and Woof, which comes from the land of proverb. What is uncomfortable? What is being comfortable, I guess, or not being comfortable in Proverbs have to do with, you know, what we're talking about.
Yeah, leadership here. That's an important idea. And I'll say this just to make a little bit of a funny here. I tell people that one of the key words in the book of Proverbs is the word but, and that's with one T. So the word but is important with one T. And that, what I mean by that is there's a lot of antithetic parallelism. Now, that's a big old phrase. It simply means that when you read the book of Proverbs, you're going to see a positive statement, and then you'll see a but in the middle of it, or a transition that says something exactly the opposite. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. I'm reading from Proverbs 15. A soft answer turns away wrath, verse 1, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So if we're going to talk about being uncomfortable, frankly, one of the uncomfortable things about leadership is sometimes, as angry as I am about, I would like to, you know, really rip their head off verbally, you know, that kind of stuff. I've got to bring a soft answer because that's the way Proverbs says, and that's a very uncomfortable position. 15:2 says, the tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of fools pour forth folly. You and I talk about this sometimes where we say, you know what, I would really like to tell this person what I really think, but you know what? The wise person holds back on some of that stuff. And so when we talk about uncomfortable leadership, some of the uncomfortable nature of this is not doing what we feel we want to do.
Absolutely. Even if it seems right.
Oh, absolutely, if it seems right. And sometimes it's the message, it's the method, it's the approach, and it's the timing that's difficult.
Okay, well, we always use phrases in life, and you always use one, life is messy, and a messy loves grace.
Yes.
Talk about how messy loves grace.
Yeah, so life is messy, and messy loves grace. This is an important phrase for me. I think all of us deal with undeserved problems, and I think all of those problems deserve undeserved favor. And so one of the things that really matters a lot to me are the blues. And I know you have introduced me to a lot of great musicians down at Memories. You took me down there for my birthday last year and stuff. We listened to some blues, some great sax music and jazz. But one of the things that I think really turns for me on this issue of the blues and the importance of grace is that these Negro spirituals that were the basis for jazz grew out of this soil that was a biblical soil of difficulty and difficulty and uncomfortableness, what we're talking about here. And so when we're talking about the blues, we're talking about humanness, where there's pain and difficulty and life is messy. And so how do we deal with that? Well, the only way that we really deal with that is giving people the grace that's been given to us because of Jesus. And so life is messy, and it necessitates that grace is also messy, because only grace can overcome the messiness.
Then I must be living in the land of grace right now, because there's some messy stuff going on. We're going to come right back. Warp and Woof Radio, and we are talking about uncomfortable leadership on today's show. Tell somebody to tell somebody. We will be right back on RadioNext.tv. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo Harold H.B. Bell. In here on Warp and Woof Radio each and every week, the Comenius Institute brings you this great show, Dr. Mark, and I'm going to tell you, man, going into the second year, it has been phenomenal.
It has been.
Watching the growth of the show, some of the guests and the topic, a matter that we keep talking about, it's continuous.
Yeah.
It never ends on the lessons that can be learned as we intertwine wisdom and knowledge and try to understand one another, basically.
That's it.
And how to make a better us.
Right.
And, today we're talking about uncomfortable leadership, and both of us playing the role as leaders. You just mentioned some of the things that were thrown at you in the last couple of weeks. And it's, Grandma said if they're not talking about you, you're not doing anything, which is a good way of saying if you're a leader and you can't accept criticism, if you can't accept that when you start building, then you're going to have new construction builders come along and tell you how to do it better. That doesn't mean you shirk and accept constructive criticism. It just means when you're the designer, then sometimes you have to be strong and go against popular opinion.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So in the second portion of the second hour, we kind of flipped the script today. We always go to current events and explain how American life is comfortable and the problems you see with a comfortable lifestyle, Mark.
Yeah, one of the things that, speaking again from a personal point of view, one of the things that I deal with living in the suburbs is what we refer to as the big white button. And the big white button is that button that you hit as you're going in the door into your house through your attached garage. You've just parked your car, and you got out of your car, you get whatever you need to get, and then you hit the button, the garage door comes down, and everything outside of that garage now is shut off from your life. And so one of the issues about being comfortable for me is getting outside of where that comfort is. And I gave a couple of examples in the last segment. But here's something that happened, and this is not an unusual event. I mean, this one is kind of unusual, but the general idea of being with your neighbors is a big deal to us. So I was talking with a neighbor just a couple of weeks ago, and we were just talking about life, and he actually has an internet show too. It's very interesting. He does, music and so on, and he's an MMA guy, which means he's like, I don't know what division of black belt in karate, but I think about the kinds of things that he does and teaches and stuff, and he's in my age group in the 50s and that kind of thing. And so one thing led to another. We're having this just a talk between two guys. He happens to be an African American guy living across the street from me. Here we are. We're just talking about life and things, and then somehow we get into how we grew up, and he starts to tear up. And he said, well, my uncle just died, and he was the one who raised me. And he begins to weep, and he puts his head on my shoulder. I mean, here's this
grown man who can kick about 10 dudes' butt.
Exactly, right. Here I am, and I'm holding this man, my neighbor. But talk about an uncomfortable feeling, and I'm thinking about all of the people that are my neighbors around and what they must be thinking watching this. But to me as a Christian, this is what I need to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be, is that kind of a person who somebody feels so comfortable with that they say, you know what, this thing just happened to me, and I'm in a weeping mood, and I need to tell somebody about this thing.
Man, that is that's different.
It is.
But it's everybody.
Yeah, it is.
And I think what we'll discover as we come, full circle with this show is, everybody has some uncomfortable. I was listening to Pastor G talking about everybody just wants to be recognized.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting up there looking at the letterhead, and Radio Next is committed to understanding that every message is relevant. And that means the little old lady who's trying to figure out how do I get to the store
That's right.
to get the needs that I have to have
Right.
versus the business owner who is trying to figure out how do I keep my revenue stream.
That's right.
And it's ironic that, everybody has a wagon.
That's right.
Everybody has a wagon, and be leery and weary if you want to switch yours. So what does uncomfortable look like in the Christian life, in this culture we live in, Mark?
Well, I just want to tag on to something you just said, because I think it's something that's powerful. Another neighbor I have said something to me when I was going through some really, really hard times. I won't tell you the whole story because we're on radio, but bottom line was, he said, if everybody in the world put their troubles down on a table and everybody walked around the table and looked at everybody else's troubles, he said to me once, everybody would pick up theirs.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody else's is too much for them.
Yeah.
And I find that to be the thing that really is an attractive idea, that somehow I really don't have it so bad because this particular problem I'm dealing with is specifically designed for me.
Yeah.
and I just got to get over the fact that I don't like the design, and so I got to get past that.
And most times we find out too, your discomfort is usually the trampoline for your nourishment to someone else. What you experience and what you've gone through is usually the vitamin that's going to help nurture someone else.
Yeah.
And so if you did not go through what you go through, there would be no way you could inject this energy.
Sure.
from your lemon.
Now, I just want you to know,
else.
HB, that when I was a kid, I hated the trampoline. So, I got to tell you.
We'll get us another analogy. But as we come to the last question in the second segment of the second hour, and this is a switch up, and for the people who love to come in and hear Dr. Mark Echo, this was a switch due to scheduling.
Yeah, that's all right.
Dr. John Gurdon. Give us some contemporary Christian examples of uncomfortable leadership.
Yeah, boy, we've had so many people on the show.
Everybody on the show.
Everybody on the show. I'll just pick a few. 10-Point Coalition.
Yeah.
I was sitting with a student here. I was out in Pennsylvania teaching last week, yeah. And one of the students was talking about the gun violence and so on in the neighborhood. And I said, boy, you got to get a hold of the 10-Point Coalition, go to this website, check out Allison Harrison, pastors, and the good work that they're doing. They were invited down to Louisville, and they're doing some great work. I know Horatio Luster's out there, the Peacemaker, and he's really making an effort to bring people together and listen to each other. Those kinds of ideas are really powerful. Richard Samuels is doing some great work with folks who are really behind difficult issues in terms of sexual enslavement. Then we had some folks here. I wasn't here for this, actually, but I listened to part of it when Jim Striedelmeyer talked with the Agape Alliance. And they were talking about the transgender folks that they know and certain populations of people that desperately need Jesus' love. Then last week we talked about gentrification, talk about a hard issue, but we had some great conversations about gentrification because that is very uncomfortable. And there's a lot of give and take on that, and there's two different points of view on this. Very difficult to talk through. And then, of course, we just had Pastor Gurdon in, and he sent me all kinds of videos. And if anybody's interested in these videos, I'll put them up. But what he's doing there at Christ Missionary Baptist Church, Indy.org, is some really great stuff. And the videos really focus on the kinds of work that are going on in the community. So he's really focused on what is going to be difficult in the community. Let me reach out at that particular point and talk about that particular thing or reach those folks that are there. And then he told this great story, and I love this story, when I asked him to send me some pictures, which I always do for everybody who comes on the show. And he sent me a picture of himself in front of a burned-out building. And I said, Pastor, there's got to be a story to that. And, of course, there was. He talked about how they're trying to do some good work in the community. That house is actually right across the street from the church building, I guess. And he had his picture taken there because he wanted to make a statement about, hey, I wanted to be in a difficult area where our church is there, talk about uncomfortable leadership. These are just a few of so many examples we could talk about.
And we are going to take our last break here. But where do we take leadership from a micro level to the macro level, on the whole?
Yep.
And I mean, we've got leaders that are the leader of the usher board in the church.
Okay.
Who has a leadership of dealing with the ushers, but then we have the pastor of the church who is the leader of, quote unquote, the church that he's has, and then that pastor has to deal with other churches who have other. How do we delicately say, okay, here's the authority that I have in this capacity that I serve, but to make it really effective, it has to merge and blend with someone else's authority.
Sure.
To make this whole puzzle fit together. And a lot of times what I sense is that we all have good intentions in our leadership effort.
Oh, yeah.
But then when it's time to put your piece in the puzzle, we don't know how to fit it.
Well,
how do we do this?
Here's the issue, I think. Let me talk about the positives and the negatives to this. The positive is that I think we just always need to find common ground. And the common ground that we're after could be lots of different things. Depends on the situation of the people, the church, the community. I mean, I could go on and on and on here. Whatever it is, we're trying to find one piece where we can work together. Because sometimes it's hard to work together. Depends on personalities and leadership types and all kinds of things there. That's a whole discussion. But let me talk about the negative of it, and that is that things generally break down when you move from from micro to macro. They generally break down from local to national. And that's the reason why when I say to people, what kind of solutions are you looking for? Don't go to the federal government. Look for solutions that are going to happen in your home, in your neighborhood, in your locale, in your city, because those are the people who know you and focus where you can focus to make a change, shine a light in the darkness. There's only so much we can do. I mean, I could go on and on and on here.
A good answer. We're going to come back out and we're going to have this last compelling conversation about uncomfortable leadership. You know, this is therapy, man, for me right now.
Good.
Doing the show. I love this.
Good.
Warp and Woof Radio, Cool Groove. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Heckle, Harold H.B. Bell, each and every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you Warp and Woof Radio, sponsored by Comenius Institute. And that is Stevie Wonder, man. And if you do not understand what Stevie Wonder's talking about, he's talking about the commitment to give all your life, as long as you have some breath.
There it is.
Give it, give it, give it. And the reason for living is the reason for giving. And that's what we're talking about today. Uncomfortable leadership, Dr. Mark.
Oh, my word.
This is a great topic. You know, sometimes God is so... I told you, you know, when you live a humorous life, I think he comes at you kind of on a funny level and, personally. And, just personally. Sometimes you go through some rocky roads and tough times. And I think that the true eloquent nature of who you are is how you handle situations. And,
that's right.
Man, been through some stuff. Best friend lost his grandson. Good friend dealing with cancer. Folks, dealing with different transitions in their life. And then you look at your little problem. And if you can't stand up and say, whoo, Lord, thank you for my drama, something's wrong. And we're talking about uncomfortable leadership. And I think if you're out there listening right now and you are in a leadership position and you feel really good about yourself, you're probably not doing a good job. I mean, as we come to the close of this, man, seriously, because if you're going to be an effective leader, being uncomfortable is just part of that territory, and you have to learn how to incorporate it into the delicate design of iron sharpening iron, as you mentioned, and then not being a butthole.
Yeah.
For a better word. Sorry, Mom Echo. But as we close this up, Mark, and great commentary today, Pastor G, want to thank him as well. But, this is the Christian community. How do we get Christian community to be engaged and understanding about uncomfortable leadership as it does effective work to make changes? And so how should Christians participate in uncomfortable leadership, Mark?
Sure. Yeah, I think for all of us, the basic bottom line question or answer to that question is we just need to deal with what we deal with every single day. So give you an example from my own life. I'm an academic, an academician. I teach high school, MA, and PhD courses. So I'm involved in lots of different things. I go to conferences, I present papers, things like this. And then I write an essay every week. And this particular essay this week, if you haven't seen it, it's on warpandwoof.org. That's warpandwoof.org. And what I wrote there was about an incident that took place on Middlebury University campus in Vermont this last week, where a conservative person who was brought in to speak was shouted down, physically accosted. A professor was sent to the hospital in the process of all of this. And so I wrote about academic free speech this last week. And as a conservative, quite frankly, I'm not well liked or welcomed or encouraged in my culture. This culture today is not set up to be genuinely kind to conservative people. So people who do not like to hear what I have to say sometimes. And quite frankly, I get talked down to by liberals on a regular basis, whether it's online or at IUPOI or whatever. So for me, if you're going to ask me the question, how do I participate in an uncomfortable leadership lifestyle? For me, it's writing and speaking. Folks don't always like to hear what I have to say, but everybody has their own area of discomfort. Mine just happens to be because I am who I am and I do what I do. That's my field, and sometimes people don't agree, and they let me know in not very nice ways sometimes.
And that's okay.
Yeah, you got to deal with it.
I would rather deal with disagreeing with the truth of someone and disagreeing with the reason why they think their truth is valid based on some type of facts-based information, and then we agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And how do we merge and bring it together? Then somebody, a yes person, or smile at you and everything's okay, and then they don't agree with you, and for the sake of stealing your McDonald's. That's an inside joke, people.
Yeah,
You'll
there you
understand it later. But no, seriously, sometimes the truth brings about that uncomfortableness that we're talking.
That's right.
And that's to be expected, and you should accept it as a leader. Local churches are a very interesting topic for me, and what I grew up watching and what we are witnessing now, because most of the churches in the neighborhoods do not affect the people in their neighborhood.
In the neighborhood, yeah.
And that is amazing for me to realize that if you're a church, everybody that comes to pay those tithes, everybody that's coming in to hear this great message and this great sermon, are driving in and then leaving, and then the people who are right in that neighborhood, the church never knows those people.
Yeah, that's right.
So how should the churches become uncomfortable in those neighborhoods?
Well, here you go. This will preach. Investigate, indicate, incarnate, and integrate. There
like
you
a
go.
Young rapper.
Yeah, just give me a beat, man. We'll go.
Okay,
number one is investigate. You got to figure it out, man. You got to figure out what is in the neighborhood so that you can then participate there. Then you got to show it for what it is. You have to indicate whatever it is and focus on that. And I think that's something that, as you well suggest, local churches, they think the problem's all out there when the problem's right next to the church building. That's really kind of a sad deal, but that's what happens sometimes. Then you have to incarnate. Incarnate means becoming in flesh. That is, you're incarnationally involved and invested personally with people right around you. And that's really powerful. Jesus taught us that. That's what he did. And then integrate. That means that we have to become a part of that community. So every church will be different. There are different neighborhoods. However that happens, investigate, indicate, incarnate, and integrate.
In the perfect world, it seems like then we would understand what is the problem of this particular neighborhood where my building sits.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we're going to get us a team inside my church, go out and make sure that we fix that cause.
That's right.
Because the cause over in Forcia, as we talk about all the time across this platform, are different in every area that you might live in.
That's right.
So, that's it. We might have to use this platform and challenge the churches in those neighborhoods to say, okay, if you're in this neighborhood, here's what we've discovered the problems are. Are you willing to help fix these problems in your own neighborhood?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
right here.
Yeah,
let's fix it. And plus, it could be some new members for your church.
Right.
Preachers who like those tithes.
Hey,
look, man, look. I'm the beast is out because really, it has to be more than that. But your best question for last is always because you are a movie buff and you do teach through the tool of the movie.
Yep.
And I love that. That is a gift, and that is your teaching mechanism. So, what are some movies that give us examples of being uncomfortable that we could watch and learn from?
So I'm going to give 3 this morning and talk about each one and a little bit, give a little bit more emphasis on each one. One of them is Crash. It was actually made in 2004, but it won the 2005 Oscar for Best Picture. And if you've never seen Crash, there are 2 different films by this title, by the way. Make sure that you get the one with Michael Pena in it. This is very important because the other one isn't very nice. So Crash tells the tale of seemingly random intersection of lives where people literally are running into each other, and always of different ethnicities, different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, all kinds of things going on in this film. If you haven't seen Crash, a few years old now, I would definitely make sure to suggest that particular film. How we act toward others does matter. Humans bear responsibility for their dealings with others. We do what's good and bad. Our rapport with each other matters. All kinds of things. Literally, we are looking at ourselves in the mirror of humankind through the movie Crash. Henry Poole is here. Henry Poole is here. That's another title. Luke Wilson is in this particular film. I highly recommend it, as difficult as it is to watch, because here's a man who's going through the throes of tremendous depression. But how he's brought out of that depression is really fascinating, which actually all starts with the manifestation of Jesus' face on a stucco outside of a building, outside of a house, on a stucco facade in this particular house. I highly recommend it because of the difficulty of seeing somebody go through very hard times, but the people that lift him out and the wonder of the conclusion is very, very powerful. I'm saving the best for last. This is one that I hesitate even mentioning on air because it's really raw and very real. But I'm telling you, if you can handle an R-rated film and deal with this kind of movie, because the ending of this will hit you like a rock upside the head. The title of this is Black Snake Moan. Stars Samuel L. Jackson. Black Snake Moan. I'll never forget watching this film. I got done watching it. I literally paced back and forth, HB, on the back of my porch for a half an hour. I was so taken by this film, so moved by it emotionally, and the difficulties of the things that are going on there. Certainly about hope, but again, I would caution everybody, it's a hard thing to watch, but it certainly deals with the issue of discomfort and then helping somebody through their discomfort to find discomfort not only for them, but for you.
Oh, man.
Tell you what.
I should have been starring in that. But no, as we close down and we have a few minutes left today, let's be vulnerable for a minute.
Sure.
In your leadership,
Yep.
you're leading a lot of young people,
Yep.
specifically,
Right.
as an educator. What is the most difficult part about the leadership that you are offering? The most vulnerable part, I guess, that you have to expose about Mark Eckel
Yeah.
in that quest to do what God has ordained you to do? What is the most difficult task?
Since I teach on two different groups, I'll talk about two different groups. So probably the thing that happens with me with high school students and the unusual way that I communicate with them and talk about being uncomfortable and so on is they need to see that I've been there and done that and been through some of the hard times that they've been through as high school students. I used to be a high school teacher. Then I did the D and now I teach other classes, but I still love high school teaching, and I love teenagers. When they see that you're real with them, they love that. Mm-hmm. And they love honesty. So truthfulness, trustworthiness, and honesty all go together. A couple weeks ago, I had to get in the face of some folks, and they didn't like it. But they came back the next week, and they were ready to go. And that, you got to do some of those kinds of things. It's hurtful sometimes, but helpful. Now, the flip of that is I was just in Pennsylvania, I mentioned, teaching an adult class. Very different, of course, teaching teenagers and adults. Mm-hmm. Well, what teenagers want to know is, have you been there and done that? And what are the difficulties that you've been invested with? And oh my, they ask you some very pointed questions, some things I would be reticent even to share on air. But I will say this, that when adults ask you, what is it that brought you to this place, and what are some of the difficult things that you have had to deal with, and tell us honestly, well, we turn off the microphone and we're honest with each other as adults. Yeah. Because you can do that with Christian people who really care and they want to learn from somebody who actually has gone through difficulties and hardships in their own lives. So I think that's really powerful and important, and I'm really grateful, by the way, that you asked me the question. Thank you.
Really, because a lot of times that might have been the power that a leader who is wavering right now needed to hear, and a lot of times as leaders, people think, and you hear ministers say it all the time.
Sure.
There's so much weight on their shoulders.
Yes.
That they got to have somebody to bounce this thing off of, too.
So I'll say this out there to anybody who's listening that needs an ear. I'll be happy to sit with you. You text me, 630-303-4891. Email me at Eckel, E-C-K-E-L, 1957 at Gmail. We'll sit, talk, discuss life, and be honest with each other. I promise you that.
Absolutely, man. Another great show. And just love the work that we're doing in the community together. And remember, each and every Wednesday, 10 a.m., 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. You can check out Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell on Warp and Woof Radio. Speaking of leaders who get knocked in the face a lot, 10-point coalitions. That's it. Coming up between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And then we have Firm Foundation. Pastor Brian Hudson bringing you the best conversation, biblical teachings, and productivity technology right here on RadioNext.tv. Until the next time, we are out.